Welcome back to another installment of Pages Promotions Virtual Book Festival Autumn 2020. This is a production of Indie Reads TV, and we find our home on CNM TV in Troy, Michigan. We are super grateful for their kindness and support of indie authors. Today, we're going to be doing a special reading with Ryan R. Ennis. He is local to the Detroit area. He writes both for children and adults. Tonight, he's going to share with us some of his children's writing. Hi, Ryan. Welcome to the program.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm so glad you came out tonight. I'm looking forward to this. I love your work, and we've worked on some other projects together before, and I just think that you have a real gift. So I'm really excited to share what you do with everybody else. So to start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, what you do in real life, and then how you got started on your writing journey.
Sure. I grew up in Canton, Michigan, and I went to Eastern Michigan University. I got my teaching degree back in 1993, and I've been teaching ever since. This is my 26th year. And I also continued on with my education, got 2 masters at Wayne State. And I've been primarily teaching in the field of autism. So, where I, just where I landed. I could have taught many different things, but, circumstances and personal interests drew me into the field, and I've been there ever since. And my writing journey actually began when I was a senior in high school. I read 2 short stories that really kind of, I don't know how, how you say, have that moment where something like changes your life. One short story I read was Grace Paley, a short story that she wrote called Wants. And then I read another one by Joyce Carol Oates, Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? They were part of the anthology for the class I was taking as a senior in high school. And it was just like, when I read each of those stories, there was something that captivated me about the way they were written, that I told myself, this is something that someday I wanted to do. And awesome. I remember I tried my first hand as a short story when I was, as a senior in high school. It took me about a week to write it, and I was reading over before I handed it to my teacher to look at, and I was just like, I thought, oh wow, this is going to be the greatest, thing that's ever been written, So I handed it to him, and he gave it back to me about a week later, and it was, how you have those critical moments. He's like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever read in my life. Yeah. He goes, you've got, and I was like, I was kind of crushed, but hey, he had some comments on it, and, from there, I never gave up. So I kept, pursuing. There's been issues, there are things going on in my life. I took a break from writing, here and there, but it's always something that I've come back to. And I just remember that, it was actually a musician that said, you don't have to always be the best at what you do to enjoy or pursue what you do. Because there's only so much room for, ones at the top, but there's always, rooms for, for your own hobbies and interests. And so.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you definitely have a talent. We worked on a short story collection together not long ago, you, Michael, and I, and excuse me for going off frame for just a second, but it's on the floor. Hold on. There we go. So this is the short story collection, Many Voices. And it was an anthology of short stories that Ryan and Michael and myself and a couple of other authors worked on together as a study in shorts. We did a workshop together, and then we did that. And Ryan has some pieces in there that just really grabbed at my imagination. So I highly recommend that you look for that book as well. I'll post a link to it on our Facebook page so that you can find it. Ryan, will you please tell us a little bit about what you're going to read tonight, and then just go ahead into the reading. I'll give you the mic, and then when you're finished, we'll open up the room for questions.
Sure. I'm going to read from one of my children's books. It's called The Thursday Surprise, a story about children and autism. And so the basis of the story was actually an incident that occurred in my classroom many years ago. And I decided, at one point I was going to develop it into a children's story, something instructional, something to increase autism awareness, and uh, something that would help children with autism as well, as people, you know, regular, what they call typical students, and adults gain a little bit of understanding about what autism is all about.
Awesome. Okay, if you could read, you have about 8 or 10 minutes.
Okay. Do I need to show the pages or just go ahead and read?
Yeah, just go ahead and read. If you have some particular illustrations you'd like to show us, we'd love that, but it's certainly not required. We're really interested in what you write, how you write, so we can get a flavor of it.
Okay. Standing in the center of the Parker Elementary School playground, Mrs. Burnett blew her whistle. On that sunny September afternoon, taking a break, Katie was leaning against the school building. The screeching sound surprised the fourth grader. Turning, she squinted into the classroom window to see the time. It was 1 o'clock. Why was her teacher ending recess early? 15 minutes early. Katie's classmates kept playing, so Mrs. Burnett's whistle blew even louder. The teacher was serious. Reluctantly, some students got off the swings while the others on the field picked up their kickballs and soccer balls. Not ready to go back inside, they walked with the pace of turtles across the grass and on the blacktop. Near the metal classroom door were several large plastic boxes marked recess games on the lids. With glum faces, the children put their balls, jump ropes, frisbees, sidewalk chalk baskets inside the bins. One by one, they lined up outside the door. Katie waited for her friend Melissa before joining them at the end. What's going on? Katie asked. Melissa shrugged her shoulders. No idea. I just hope we don't have another pop math quiz. My brain still hurts a little from figuring out all those story problems on the last one. She rubbed her forehead. After the teacher opened the door, the students sat down at the tables. Katie picked up her pencil, about to work on adding fractions again, but set it down when Mrs. Burnett clapped her hands for everyone's attention. I guess you're wondering why you didn't have your full recess today, the teacher said. We needed a few extra minutes for some of you to grab your books to take to Mr. Appleton's class. Melissa quickly raised her hand. Mrs. Burnett nodded, telling her that it was all right to ask her question. What are we doing in Mr. Appleton's room? She asked. I was just about to explain, the teacher replied, looking around the room at the wondering faces. As a new teacher, Mr. Appleton doesn't have as many storybooks as we do in this class, so it'd be nice to share some of ours with his students. This could mean that you read a story aloud to someone in his room, or maybe listen as some of his students read a story to you. The students I will pick will be doing this every Thursday afternoon. Then in February, I'll let some other students have a chance. A big smile spread across the teacher's face. Just think of all the wonderful stories you can share with each other. Does anyone have any questions? Please ask. Melissa raised her hand again. Yes, Melissa, the teacher asked. Why do students with autism get their own teacher, she asked. Why are they different? Before Mrs. Burnett could reply, Katie put up her hand. Without waiting for the teacher's nod of approval, she blurted out, doesn't Melissa mean autism? The month before, on the first day back to school after summer vacation, Katie passed the art room. A man was sitting behind Miss Holloway's desk. She could tell right away he wasn't a new art teacher. All the supplies, the construction paper, boxes of crayons and markers, the paint jars and brushes had disappeared from the shelves. Gone as well were the long tables where students had spread out their glue and scraps while making crafts. In place of those tables were much shorter ones. When Katie later told her mom about the changes, her mom said she had read in the school newsletter that Mrs. Holloway's classroom was now used for students with autism. She asked her mom why students with autism had their own classroom and their teacher. but her mom didn't explain it very clearly. Yes, Katie, you're right, answered Mrs. Burnett. The students have autism. They have special needs. Sometimes they talk and act differently because their bodies don't always work the same way yours do. They may have trouble looking at you when you're talking to them. Maybe they won't tell you when something bothers them, but they want to learn things and make friends just like you. The teacher tapped her bottom lip with her index finger and her eyes skipped around from student to student. Let's see, whom shall I pick? Her eyes zeroed in on the student sitting to her left. Okay, Nathan, Ricardo, Tommy. She paused and waited. Once the boys stood up, her eyes shifted to the right. Lashandra, Melissa, Katie. She motioned for those girls to stand. Come choose some books to take with you to Mr. Appleton's room. Feeling uneasy about what she was supposed to do, Katie sat back down at her table. She watched Melissa and the other students grab some books from the shelves. Come on, Katie, Melissa said, waving for her friend to join them. Get some books. Katie slowly got up and went over to Melissa, who handed her friend 3 books. The titles were The Colors of Fall, The New Goldfish in Town, and Jan's Big Race. Now that Katie and the other kids had books in their hands, they were ready to leave the room. But Mrs. Appleton stopped them at the door with a sheet of paper in her hand. Mr. Appleton and I have the same rules, the teacher said firmly. Treat his students with kindness and respect. If you have any problems, let Mr. Appleton know. He'll gladly help you. Before dismissing them, Mrs. Burnett read aloud a short list of do's and don'ts that they were to follow with their reading partners. The do's included smile and introduce yourself, respect personal space, ask Mr. Appleton for help when needed. Don'ts. Don't make annoying noises. Don't get upset by another student's behavior. Don't boss around your new friend. When Katie walked into Mr. Appleton's room, she thought about how boring it looked. Last year, the walls were covered with all kinds of drawings and painting and collages the students had made. Now there was just a plain calendar on the wall and daily schedules for different students posted on another. Since she didn't have her own room anymore, Mrs. Holloway carted around her supplies from class to class when she taught art. On each of Mr. Appleton's students' desks were blue bins filled with pencils, folders, and puzzles. Because Katie's classmates had already sat down, she went over to the desk where the boy did not have a partner. She read the name on the bin. It said, Michael. Good afternoon, Mr. Appleton said, walking around the room. Katie's classmates began to read their stories. Instead of sitting down, Katie just stood there. Michael was writing his name over and over on a sheet of paper and didn't seem to see her. She wondered what to say to him. Hello, Mr. Appleton said as he came over to her. What's your name? Katie. Still uncomfortable, she teetered from foot to foot. Nice to meet you, Katie. The teacher tapped the table lightly. Please sit down. This is Michael. Hi, Michael, Katie said. Michael, I like how you're working, Mr. Appleton said, but you need to put your things away. Katie is here to read you a story. Michael dropped the pencil onto the paper, then he folded his hands on his lap and stared down at the desk. Thank you, Michael, Mr. Appleton said. Katie sat down while the teacher walked away. Opening one of the books, Katie said, this is called The New Goldfish in Town. She moved the book in front of Michael so he could see the first page showing a boy and his mom at a pet store. When she started to read, Michael squirmed in his seat. In a matter of seconds, he picked up his pencil and practiced writing his name again. You want me to read another book, Katie asked? I have 2 others. Michael didn't answer. He tilted his head away from her as he wrote. She opened the second book entitled Jan's Big Race. She read the first few sentences of the new story. Instead of listening, Michael set his elbow on the table and his head on his hand. He flipped his paper over and wrote some more. Michael, Katie said softly, trying to get him to look at her. Mr. Appleton said you aren't supposed to be writing right now. Still, Michael acted like she wasn't there. After a loud sigh, she raised her hand. Michael wasn't paying attention to her. Mr. Appleton, who was at another table, would have to help. Suddenly, the phone on the teacher's desk rang. Mr. Appleton hurried to answer it. Since he spoke in a low voice, Katie couldn't tell what he was saying. She wondered who was on the phone with him and how long he would be. She placed the third book, called The Colors of Fall, over the worksheet. "Look at this book," she exclaimed. On the cover were quilt patches in the colors of orange, brown, red, and a golden yellow. Michael turned his head toward her. Finally, he was ready to listen. "Can you tell me what these colors are?" Katie asked. She touched the colored quilt patches on the cover. "What's your favorite color?" Michael stared at the cover for a few moments, then he pushed the book until it fell off the table. Because the front and back covers were made of cloth, the book didn't make much noise when it hit the floor. Katie sighed even louder than before, shaking her head. She was so upset at Michael that all she wanted to do was go back to her classroom. She raised her hand again, but the teacher was still on the phone. Looking around, she noticed all her classmates were busy sharing books with their new friends. When she glanced back at Michael, she saw he was writing again on his paper. Bored, Katie drummed her fingers against the table. Why did Mrs. Burnett have to choose me, she wondered. Soon she quieted her hand. Making annoying noises was at the top of the list of Mrs. Burnett's list of don'ts for kids with autism. Mr. Appleton hung up the phone and said, "I'm sorry to cut it short today. Miss Holloway will be here soon." He paused and smiled at them. "Thank you for coming. You did an excellent job. See you next week." In a line, the students from Mrs. Burnett's class headed back to their own classroom with their books tucked under their arms. Katie and Melissa were at the back. "So how'd you like it, Katie?" How'd you like it, Melissa asked. "Not at all," Katie replied. "Why? What happened? Didn't you see?" Some tears were about to trickle down Katie's cheek, but she held them back. "I wasn't really watching you," Melissa said. "I was too busy with my reading partner, Ben." "Well," Katie explained, "I was with a kid named Michael, and it was no fun. He wouldn't even listen to me when I was reading." She shook her head. "I don't know what his problem is." "Remember what Mrs. Burnett said?" Katie nodded. "I remember. Mr. Appleton's students are special. They act differently than we do. But if kids with autism won't look at you, what's the point of reading to them?" "I guess they aren't all alike, because Ben didn't give me any trouble." Melissa paused. "Well, he did make this weird humming sound, but he stopped when I opened the books on polar bears. He even read one of them with me. I lucked out." "Yeah, you're lucky," Katie agreed. "Very lucky." Later around at 4 o'clock, Katie came home from school. She heard her dad in the kitchen making dinner. Since her mom didn't get home until almost 6, her dad usually fixed meals during the week. Katie's favorite meal was spaghetti topped with meatballs and a lot of Parmesan cheese. As she walked up to her dad at the stove, the frown she had worn all afternoon turned into a smile. She was delighted to see he was boiling spaghetti noodles. "How was school?" her dad asked. Katie shrugged her shoulders. Her smile flipped back to a frown. "It was all right." Not wanting to discuss it, she grabbed what she needed from the cupboards to set the table. She didn't feel like talking about how Mrs. Burnett had picked her to read a story to another kid in another class who didn't even like her. During dinner, Katie was quiet. Once she finished helping her mom clear the table, she made her way upstairs to her bedroom. On her walls were framed posters of Dalmatians, golden retrievers, and Siamese cats. She loved dogs and cats. If her parents didn't have allergies, she'd want a dog and a cat as pets. One Saturday each month, her parents dropped her off at Aunt Jill's farm, where she stayed all morning and afternoon to play with her aunt's 4 long-haired collies and help bathe and groom the dogs. When it was time for Aunt Jill to drive her home, she always found it hard to say goodbye to Sadie, Max, Lexi, and Cooper. Someday, Katie hoped to own a big house with many acres like her aunt for raising animals. And someday, she hoped to be a famous veterinarian with her own show on TV. On her program, she would teach people the best way to care for their animals. She opened the folder on her desk, took out a sheet of paper, and then sat down on her bed with fluffy pillows behind her back. Her 15 spelling words for the week were on the paper. Mrs. Burnett gave spelling tests every Friday, so she wanted to make sure she knew how to spell all the words. There was a knock at her bedroom door. Katie looked up. Yeah? Her mom stepped into the room, her forehead wrinkled with worry. Are you all right, honey? She asked. Katie nodded that she was fine. Her mother, though, sat down on the bed and lovingly patted Katie's shoulder. Talk to me, her mom said. Tears filled Katie's eyes, and this time she couldn't keep them back. The tears streamed down her cheeks in wavy lines. Her mom gently wiped some of them away with her hands. Honey, what's the matter? I had the worst day ever, Katie sobbed. She dried her face with her own hands. What happened? Mrs. Burnett, she had me go down the hall to this new teacher's class. His name is Mr. Appleton. He teaches students with autism, right? Her mom asked. Yeah, and I was supposed to read some stories to a boy there named Michael, but he wouldn't listen to any of them. And the room is nothing like it was when it had been Mrs. Holloway's. It's real boring now. There's nothing on the walls and boards. Sorry, that's my dog.
That's all right. It's actually a good place to stop because we're starting to run out of time and I want to get some time in for questions and answers. But thank you very, very much for your reading. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Everyone can turn on their microphones, and if you have questions or comments for Ryan, this is the time.
What kind of dog is that?
I have an English setter. So she gets impatient. I take her for a walk every evening, and I wasn't able to do it when I got home, and then, with this event going on. So. But as soon as it's over, we'll be going out. Hopefully it won't be raining.
Charlie
it'll be a
does the
really
same
short
thing.
walk tonight.
Yeah, we walked the dogs just before we started too.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? Go ahead, Michael.
Two things to comment. Yeah, I could actually visualize the classroom. That was very good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And I think you did a really good job explaining the, should I say, challenges that an autistic person has.
Absolutely.
What they go through. It's not well understood.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought that you did really well was I definitely got a sense of tension and anxiety from Katie's character. I really, I got a sense of how she was kind of unsure and frustrated, and those emotions really came across really well. I thought you did that well.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else have questions or comments for Ryan?
Yeah, I like the passage. I like the direction it's going. I'll be interested to read it and see what the way that it came out. It's a very underappreciated or underwritten about area, and it'll be interesting to see how you handle it.
Yeah. And Ryan actually has two books. The other one, what's the title of the second one, Ryan?
The second one was a sequel to the first, the September Surprise, but it's kind of a standalone sequel. You can read this one without having to read the first or vice versa. They're not really dependent on one another for you to, understand the story.
And then what's the age group that these are written for, Ryan?
The Thursday Surprise, I would say like anywhere from, I've even heard, some students are pretty advanced these days with, parents, reading to them, getting them into reading programs. School is a lot different. Like when I went to school, like, now kindergarten is like a full day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised, I haven't taught elementary in a long, long time. And I'm kind of surprised with some kids that I'll see out, with their parents. Like my neighbors next door, they have a kindergartner, and he read this book, almost cover to cover without a lot of problem as a kindergartner. I remember as a kindergarten, we were just working on letter sound, recognition. So,
Yep.
but comfortably, I'd say like, first to third grade. This, the September surprise is a little bit longer, second grade and on up, but those reading levels
Okay.
are not set in stone.
Right. Any other questions for Ryan?
No, just good job.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So
Did
before,
you-
go ahead, Deborah.
Oh, I was just gonna, do we have time? Or I was gonna ask about, because I thought he had written something for adults too, but
Yep, I was
we
just
don't
going to
have
ask about
time,
that.
I
See,
can-
you and me, we're doing
Okay.
our thing. So Ryan, the other book that you wrote that we're featuring during this festival, can you tell us we've got just like 5 minutes left, so if you can tell it just a quick synopsis, give us an idea of what that's about.
Sure. This book is called The Unexpected 20 Tales, and it's just basically a book that I deal with characters that a lot of like man and or male and female relationships, problems in relationships, people with having their own like I should say like driven by their own like personal or internal desires to achieve like some type of romantic fulfillment, and kind of taking them on paths that they never expected.
So is
that's
this
kind
a
of like
collection of shorts, or is this a novel?
It's a collection of 20 stories.
I'm sorry, we lost you. Say again.
It's a collection of 20 short stories.
So they're short stories. Okay.
Yeah.
And they all have the theme of romance and relationship.
Yes, basically. There are a few that
Okay.
aren't necessarily, about relationships, but the main theme is that, their own like personal turmoils or trying to achieve their own desires takes them on paths that they never expected. Some for better, and some in directions that they would rather not have, that happened. So that's why
Okay.
they're all like called The Unexpected.
Awesome. Perfect. So as you can see, Ryan writes for both children and adults. So depending on your reading tastes, you can check out his work and you might find something in there that you enjoy. Do we have any other last parting questions or comments for Ryan before we end our segment today? No? Okay. Awesome. Ryan, thank you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Okay,
And
thank you.
apologize to the dog for us. I know it gets difficult.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. Again, this is Ryan Ennis, and I will post links on our Facebook pages to his work so that you can find his books. And we'll do a replay again tomorrow, as we always do. This has been Pages Promotions Virtual Book Festival Autumn 2020, a production of Indie Reads TV, and we find our home on CNM TV. Come on back tomorrow. We're going to do this again with more people, more fun. Check out the Facebook page. There's tons of stuff going on there too. Thanks everybody for coming out. Have a nice night.
Yeah, good night.
Good
night.
night.